world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
Sign up for my free daily newsletter, The Current, at getkim.com. So, Andrew, I have to tell you, I read this article over in Wired magazine.
Okay.
Or Wired.com, I should say. And it was just fascinating to me because how many phone calls do you think that we've gotten here on the show over the years about somebody who was getting pig butchered?
Oh, I mean, there was a peak where it was once a week. Now I think maybe we're down to 3 times a month.
And how many times when we talk to these people, and like one guy sits in the top of my head right now, where they don't want to believe that this is happening to them.
Of course.
Yeah.
And it's all just what I hear when they call and tell us their stories is they are so pushed towards greed that they think there's this huge payoff in the end. They don't care what they're risking.
Yeah. I mean, what was that one guy? Like
800,000?
Yeah, $800,000.
To a stranger he met on Facebook.
Okay. Another one was $500,000.
Yeah.
I remember there was the one guy that's sitting in my head right now is the guy who told us the whole story. And I said to him, "You are a pig and you are getting butchered." And he's like, but she loves me. I'm like, oh my God, stop.
There was that one where he was down, I thought it was like $125,000. And then he still thought there was a chance that he would get the investment back.
We're like, dummy.
And it's just heartbroken for these people.
So Andy Greenberg is a senior writer at Wired, and he's a phenomenal writer, Andrew. Phenomenal. And you know, I'm very critical of other writers. I'm critical of everybody. So one night he's sitting there and he gets an email from a guy calling himself Red Bull. And he's a computer engineer trapped inside a scam compound in Southeast Asia's Golden Triangle. Okay. The message says, "I'm currently working inside a major crypto romance scam operation. I'm a computer engineer being forced to work here under a contract. I've collected internal evidence of how the scam works step by step, and I'm still inside the compound, so I cannot risk direct exposure. But I want to help shut this down." Could you imagine getting a note like that? Just out of the blue?
I wouldn't believe it.
Yeah, because it sounds kind of scammy, doesn't it?
Well, if you're, being held, you're against your will, and you're being forced to work, how'd you get the freedom to email me?
Joining us right now is Andy Greenberg from Wired. So, Andy, when you first saw that email, what went through your mind?
Well, hi, Kim. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. You tell the beginning of the story very well. I mean, I got this email out of the blue, no subject line, from the encrypted email on the encrypted email service Proton Mail, and it said exactly as you read it, like that this was somebody trapped in a scam compound. I mean, the thing that you didn't say in your introduction about pig butchering is that these scams these days are being carried out by victims of human trafficking, hundreds of thousands of enslaved workers in these compounds across Southeast Asia, mostly. And, this person was saying he was in the Golden Triangle, this like little region of northern Laos that's basically, carved out and controlled by Chinese business interests, most of which are illegal. But I didn't know what to believe, and to Andrew's point, I was kind of weirded out too, like, how did you manage to send me this email? Right. Because my understanding was that these compounds, people were held in shackles and chains, and they were, beaten, and they're like truly brutal modern slavery systems. But I would learn over the course of this story that it's not that simple. And I did, tell this source. I just took a chance. I had to see if this was real. And I gave him my username on the Signal encrypted messaging app. And then that night, I got the first messages from the source that were very detailed documentation of of, a kind of written report of how everything in the compound worked, a flow chart, very detailed new information to me about some of the parts of this operation. Everything from how they have a model room where a deep fake model sits ready to make video calls with victims, to the fact that there's a little gong in the corner of the office that people strike whenever a scam is pulled off, and the things that they chant when they have a successful scam. Stuff I never heard before, but I still didn't know what to believe. So I actually video called this source over Signal, and he picked up with no hesitation and showed me his face, and then showed me out the window and showed me that he did seem to be in a kind of what looked like a developing country.
So Andy, did he smuggle a phone in?
Right. So the way that he contacted me was that he got permission. When they meet their quotas, it turns out they are sometimes given a day off. He had gotten permission on his day off to go to a hotel in the Golden Triangle. The whole Golden Triangle is in some ways itself this kind of mega compound. So he couldn't leave the Golden Triangle. They'd taken away his passport. But within this kind of small city-sized region of Laos, they do have freedom of movement. And the ways that they're prevented from leaving are basically that their passport is taken. The cops are also very often on the payroll of these Chinese mafia-run compounds. So it's very difficult for them to leave. But otherwise, they're not held in a room. They're not in a prison cell. It's more like a kind of system of very strict indentured servitude where they're held kind of in constant debts. They're not allowed to leave until they pay off some debt that is, the system is created in a way where they basically will never be able to pay off that debt. And they cannot leave until their bosses allow them to. This is it's a more kind of gray area form of human trafficking than what I understood. But he was absolutely, it turned out, trapped and unable to leave of his own free will.
How did he get there?
So, the typical story, which was also in this case, he was lured with a fake job offer. I just to I don't mean to get ahead of myself. I would proceed to talk to this source who called himself Red Bull for days and days. And we got into a kind of routine of me. I between him leaving his dormitory where he slept in a room with 5 other men with a toilet in the corner, and going to the office to begin a 15 or 16-hour shift of spamming out scam messages all day long, and not day, really. These were night shifts synced to U.S. daytime hours. We would sometimes speak on Signal for the short window between him leaving the dormitory and starting his work. And I did begin to hear his life story. And he was a computer engineer, as he told me, who had actually gotten a 3-year degree in India, where he's from, before he was lured with a fake job offer. He thought he was going to be an IT manager in an office in Laos. And only once he arrived was his passport taken away, and he was told what his real job was, which was to be a scammer, a pig butcherer who would spend, these night shifts just trying to lure victims, build trust with them through fake personas, a romance scam that turns into eventually an investment scam where, as you described, people are tricked into sending and losing hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in some cases.
So you mentioned the money, so I from what I understand, that in order to leave the compound is that you have to almost pay them off whatever you might be worth, which we'll get to that in a second. But when all this is happening, Andy, and you're doing video calls with this guy in the Golden Triangle, were you afraid that he might get caught?
Well, a lot of things were running through my mind. I was, of course, worried about his safety. I was also sometimes wary that he might be scamming me, but we'll get to that, later. I hope he'll come to that. But yes, he wanted from the very beginning. He was a whistleblower. He was determined to leak to me everything he could to expose this criminal operation and these people who had essentially tricked him and were enslaving him. He wanted to wear a hidden camera, a hidden microphone. He wanted to install spyware on his boss's computer to, send me the communications between the bosses really risky things. He wanted to install a remote desktop software on his own work computer so that I could see everything he was doing all day long. All of these things, once I consulted with my, colleagues and experts, we decided all of this was way too dangerous. I mean, if he were caught talking to me, he would be killed. We all agreed on that,
Wow.
including him. So it was an extremely sensitive situation. And what we ultimately settled for was that I would speak to him in these few free moments when he was not being surveilled throughout the day. And then he actually did install Signal as well on his work machine, his work PC, and disguised it, changed the icon on the desktop so that it looked like a shortcut to his hard drive on that Windows computer. And then he would send me stuff throughout the day, including internal documentation, including photos and like a picture of a whiteboard on which, you could see the leaderboard of his colleagues and who was scamming the most people. And he, at times he would, as he would like walk, as he walked around, like talking to me on Signal, he would then say like, okay, record your screen. And he would turn on video, and then he would walk into the cafeteria, and I would be able to video record, a view of the cafeteria inside this modern slavery compound.
Wild.
Once into the actual office, and I could see the layout of the office, the ways that there were colored flags on different teams' desks to connote whether they were meeting their scam quotas for revenue that month.
So you said that you said like you learned things that you didn't know. You mentioned the gong that was hit whenever you said that it was after every $100,000 or something like that.
Well, there was actually a small gong that was struck for any scam, and then a big Chinese kind of ceremonial drum on a stand that was only struck. The scammer was allowed to strike it as his big celebration when they took somebody for $100,000 or more. But that was a kind of special event.
When people would scam people, would they be proud of themselves?
Well, there was a very strange culture that I would come to understand eventually. And I'm like getting ahead of myself a bit, but eventually Red Bull did get to me the internal logs of the WhatsApp channels of this scam compound, so that I and my colleagues at Wired were able to read essentially all of the internal communications for his floor of the office over 3 months. And it was very eye-opening and very weird and interesting. I mean, the culture of this place was almost like they were pretending that it wasn't a scam slave colony, but rather like a car dealership or a corporate sales floor.
It sounds like
the
it.
Bosses,
Yeah.
The bosses would send these motivational messages to everybody, like, when you reach out to that next customer, and they would call them customers and clients, even though, of course, they're scam victims. They would say, like, act like you're bringing them something of value because you are, like this is not just a job. This is a mission. We are here together to build connections, like crazy Orwellian, strange lies about what they were doing. And the idea, I think, was to, create a sense among them that this was something that they were motivated to do, doing voluntarily. But of course, they were not. They had no choice. And I think that it did create a sense that nobody could admit to each other that they didn't want to be there. Not at least on these public channels. I'm sure they did in private, but there was this false sense of this being a sales floor where everybody's motivated, and they were promised commissions on any scams they pulled off. Although I would learn that those commissions were rarely paid. Most of these guys were kept entirely in debt, completely broke, subsisting entirely on the food in the cafeteria, which was like just rice and vegetables that Red Bull told me tasted of strange chemicals. And even that would be withheld if they so much as showed up late for a work shift or late to lights out in the dormitory where they were forced to sleep.
So Andy, this is an incredible story. What I have to do is we have to do a commercial so that we can pay some bills around here. And so I'm going to put you on hold, all right? And when we come back, I want to talk more about how Red Bull was able to get out. How much money are we talking as far as the scam operation that's in this triangle? Gosh, it's, Andrew, like you never really think about it, right?
And I don't think they want us to think about it.
No.
Obviously, because, us as a country, even though we're the citizens that are getting robbed, our government's not doing anything about it that we know of.
Hey, if you're just tuning in, thank you for that. But boy, you really need to back up, right, Andrew? You need to hear the whole story.
This is a crazy story.
It is. And we've been in conversation with Andy Greenberg. He's a senior correspondent at Wired, and he covers the dark side of tech. And we've been talking about pig butchering and how it's coming out of this golden triangle. And it's Chinese mafia, right, I guess?
I mean, you think you're some guy in a basement in the middle of nowhere trying to steal a couple $100 from you, but it's really a bunch of slaves being forced to do all this work.
It is human trafficking. And what I found most interesting so far, well, everything that Andy said was interesting, but that they run it like a sales operation. And maybe because I've worked for sales companies
You get
before.
spiffs the more you rob from people.
Yes. And they give you can do this. Yes. Have a great day. Come on, bring it home. Make it large.
Do you think that poster with the cat holding onto the wall and it says "Hang in there" is up on the walls in the call center?
That would be funny. That would be funny. Catfishing, get it?
Oh yeah.
I was explaining for the people who are like going, I don't know what the hell he's talking about.
That's most people.
So, Andy, do you have any idea how much money we're talking about? That maybe in just the time that Red Bull was talking to you, that Americans were scammed?
Well, the entire time of my actual, being the journalist handling Red Bull as a source was surprisingly short, but incredibly intense. I will say it was just a few weeks. The overall time, though, that he gathered evidence on for me, you mentioned 4,200 pages of documents. What that actually was that he would use screen recording on his phone and scroll through the WhatsApp channels of the compound, the part of it he had access to, and then give me videos of this. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves in the story, but he actually had to get me those videos after he got out. He smuggled these videos out and got them to me. And then we at Wired, we converted those videos, those scrolling through these WhatsApp channels, into 4,200 pages of screenshots that captured the log of all of their internal communications. And every time that they successfully scammed someone, they would post a kind of announcement, this like big, celebratory announcement with all of these like emojis and these like kind of strange poetic messages like, don't be a sheep, be a wolf with fangs. Ordinary people can break through and achieve their dreams. And so today had scammed somebody for, $300,000. And you would see each announcement, the exact numbers. So we were able to essentially scrape those, me and my colleagues at Wired who on this reporting team, and figure out that just this small group, really just like his floor of the compounds, scammed about $2.2 million in those few months, which actually is like, I was kind of surprised it was just $2.2 million. But I think that shows that he was just, he had visibility only into one floor of one building among dozens of compounds in just the Golden Triangle. Then there's also, I would say the majority of these scam compounds are actually in Myanmar and Cambodia, which are even friendlier countries for these criminals. And as a whole, I can tell you, like, based on like other analyses by law enforcement, by researchers that I speak to, that this kind of scamming as a whole, the whole industry is carrying out tens of billions of dollars in scams every year. I mean, that number is hard to fathom. It is bigger than any kind of cyber crime in history, as far as I know. Definitely like the biggest form of cybercrime in the world today.
So, one of the things that we didn't talk about yet is how they found their victims. I mean, was it the classic friending somebody on Facebook and then promising crypto riches, or was it through romance scams, or all of the above?
All of them were romance scams that would turn into investment scams. And all of these guys would pretend to be wealthy women. They were all, victims of human trafficking, mostly from South Asia, India, Pakistan, Nepal, as well as sub-Saharan Africa. And for the Indians, they were told to target Indian Americans, and for Pakistani Americans. And this was, it turns out, kind of like a typical, standard way of doing this so that you would have no language or cultural barriers. And then they would try to find lonely, men with like some amount of money who seemed like, vulnerable to a romance scam. And then they would text them, they would find them on Facebook, for instance, or Instagram, and then start sending them messages to, begin a conversation. And then only after, fattening up the pig, this is why it's called pig butchering, after weeks or months sometimes of building trust and intimacy, they would say, by the way, like, it seems like, you're having money problems or you're not as wealthy as me. And like, I use this crypto trading platform. Maybe you should try it. In fact, like, I would be a little disappointed if you were not ambitious enough to try it, because this is a sure way to double your money. And I can give you an introduction to this platform. Of course, the platform is fake.
The platform's fake, and there's no way that it's all simulated. It doesn't work. I mean, it's not real. What would happen if Red Bull, and maybe this did happen? What happens if somebody tries to escape?
Well, right. So after a few weeks of this, my editors at Wired were very nervous about this story, as you can imagine. He had given me some really good stuff, and we essentially we decided, like, it's enough. We should stop risking this guy's life. Like, let's stop the reporting, and we'll wait till he gets free. Like, he believed that if he worked there for a year, like, that's kind of the agreement, 1 year, and then they would be let go. I'm not sure if that is true or whether they would have let him go. But as soon as I told him that we were done with this kind of reporting process, that he'd given me enough, he immediately surprised me by saying, no, in that case, then I need to escape now. I can't stay here. I can't keep doing this. And his plan to escape was that he would forge a fake Indian police document showing that he was under investigation back home in India, and that he had to be allowed to go home to deal with this. He was going to show this to his bosses. It didn't work. I warned him. I believed that it wouldn't work, and sadly, he just was determined to try it. And the result, I'm sorry, this is a dark story. He was put in a room, beaten up, starved, drugged, with some unidentified white powder designed to make him talk, and really, essentially from that point on, held hostage in the compound, and told that he had to find somebody to pay a ransom to be allowed to leave. I mean, this was one of the darkest. I mean, just knowing that this was happening to him was one of the darkest periods of my life as a journalist, for sure. But he did, to kind of give people the end of the story, he did eventually get free, thanks in part to a raid that was carried out by the Laotian police. His compound got a tip about this raid, so they had to move to a different building. And then while this was happening, they were all, forced to work out of cramped space, and some of them were working out of their dormitory rather than the office. Their work was disrupted. There wasn't enough space for everybody. Red Bull at this point was sick and starving and useless. He could not find anybody to pay his ransom. I was not allowed to pay his ransom, I think for understandable reasons. Mm-hmm. Journalistic ethics, you can't pay sources, but also we couldn't pay a human trafficking operation and reward them for this. I mean, it was a very difficult decision, but I had that restriction, and I think it makes sense, sadly. So he told his bosses, I'm dead weight here. Like, nobody is going to pay you for my freedom. Please just let me go. And they, to my surprise, agreed and just kicked him out, essentially. Kicked him out of the compound. He left without even his shoes. He was not allowed to get his belongings from his dorm room even, and had to get home from northern Laos back to India in a pair of flip-flops and with absolutely no money. It was a very difficult experience for him, but he did get free and get home, and I'm still in contact with him. And no, they never detected, as far as I can tell, that he was speaking to me. He was only punished for trying to escape, and he did eventually get free.
Now, do you think he's still in danger now?
Certainly. I worry about his safety, but I should say that Red Bull is an incredibly brave guy. He really wanted me to tell this story. he decided that he wanted me to reveal his real name even in this story and show his face. And we published a video kind of documentary along with our written piece. And I can say that his name is Mohammed Muzahir. I want to give him, that's his full actual name, Mohammed. And I want to give him credit for like the incredible work he's done. I think he deserves to be named here as the whistleblower that made all of this possible, these revelations.
I have a question hearing all of this, because his plan from the beginning was to take this down. And this sounds like it's one satellite office in probably a bigger, more complex, organized crime ring. Who's at the top? Who, when the money is funneling up, who's collecting?
Well, I was able to assemble an org chart of the part of the compound that he is, that he worked in. And if you go to our story on Wired.com, you can see that org chart. It goes up as far as 3 bosses or 4 bosses even above him to these Chinese organized criminals, it seems like. But he only knew them by their pseudonyms. These Chinese names that are probably not their legal names. We don't know who's above that. There's no doubt that there are higher level mafiosos in these Chinese crime syndicates that are making enormous amounts of money that I cannot identify. I mean, to your point, Red Bull, Mohammed wanted to take down this operation, but I told him from the beginning, I can't do that. All I can do is reveal the truth of them, the details, the day-to-day life, maybe even on a level nobody has ever seen before with your help. And maybe that will, just telling the story, I hope it's of some value in getting the world to realize what's happening here and hopefully for governments to take action. I mean, as you said, Andrew, the U.S. government is not doing nearly enough about this problem, which is not just, I'm kind of flabbergasted myself that federal law enforcement in the U.S. doesn't care more about the loss of billions of dollars from American victims. Yeah. But aside from that, even, there are hundreds of thousands of actual people held in modern slavery across Southeast Asia, and their lives are ruined to at least the same or far worse degree. And if we care at all about this humanitarian crisis, we should be doing more.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for all your reporting. Gosh, I couldn't imagine. Your emotions must have been all over the board putting this story together. It's
definitely the most stressful story I've ever done in my career, but it pales in comparison to the experience of Mohammed himself. So I don't want to make it all about me.
But fantastic reporting. Really.
Thank you.
And,
Thank
really
you for telling the story.
And really enlightening, so many folks about what is really going down with these operations. And if you have not read this, you have not read Andy's story, you need to go to Wired.com. And because there are a lot of details that we just didn't have time to cover here on the show, but it puts pig butchering in just a whole different perspective. And just as a reminder, right, Andrew, let's just go through the rules, okay?
Yes.
Number one, nobody's going to contact you out of the blue and say that you're they want to be your friend.
Right. If someone introduces themselves on any social media platform and wants to move that conversation off of that social media platform to WhatsApp or Signal, wherever, it's a scam.
It's a scam. And somebody wants money because they need to pay a doctor's bill, travel, whatever it may be, pay their rent, their mortgage, and then they want to tell you that they know somebody who's really good at crypto, and you can make. That one guy thought he was making 30. He was going to make 30 times his money. Remember that guy called in?
And he lost it all.
Lost it all
because it's a scam.
It's all a scam. Wait, you know what? Isn't he great, Andy? I really enjoyed talking to him.